Today, I will talk about the virtue of integrity, and I will summarize what Jesus has taught us about this virtue and how it helps us become more peaceful and gentle, both in spirit and in body. Please like and subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey. Now, let's get started. First, introducing the importance of integrity in life. Integrity is one of the most valuable qualities a person should cultivate throughout life. It is not merely an action, but an attitude, a humane approach to life. When we talk about integrity, we think not only of doing good deeds, but also of honesty, love, and fairness in all our relationships. Jesus teaches us that integrity is the foundation of all moral behavior. A person with integrity not only brings happiness to themselves, but also spreads joy and peace to those around them. In today's fast-paced and challenging world, it is easy to forget the value of integrity and be tempted by ambition and selfishness. However, Jesus constantly reminds us that, in this chaotic world, if each person lives with a pure heart and acts sincerely, that is the path to true peace and happiness. For example, in the story of the Good Samaritan, although he was not of the same religion, he did not hesitate to help a wounded Jewish man, with no thought of personal gain. This act of integrity led Jesus to affirm, "It is the one who truly loves and helps others who is deserving of praise from God." From this, we can see that integrity is not just a quality of a good person, but also the way to foster connection and understanding among people, making society a better place. Secondly, Jesus teaches us about love and forgiveness. One of the most fundamental lessons Jesus teaches us is the power of love and forgiveness. In his teachings, love is not merely an emotion, but a conscious choice to care for others, even those who may wrong us. Jesus emphasizes that love should extend beyond our friends and family to even our enemies. He sets a powerful example in the Bible when, while hanging on the cross, he prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Luke 23 verse 34. Despite the immense suffering he endured, Jesus chose forgiveness over revenge. This act shows us that love and forgiveness are not about condoning wrongdoing, but about freeing ourselves from hatred and resentment, and offering others the chance to change. The story of the prodigal son is another powerful example. In this parable, a young man squanders his inheritance and falls into poverty, only to return to his father, expecting punishment. However, his father runs to him with open arms and forgives him completely, saying, "For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Luke 15 verse 24. This parable illustrates how God's love and forgiveness are unconditional, and how we, as followers of Christ, are called to forgive others in the same way. Forgiveness is not easy. It requires strength, humility, and the willingness to let go of past hurts. But Jesus teaches us that forgiving others is essential for our own peace of mind and spiritual growth. It helps break the cycle of anger and revenge, and it brings us closer to God's love, which is boundless and all-encompassing. When we forgive, we choose to embrace the love that heals and restores relationships, rather than allowing bitterness to divide us. Third, integrity means living honestly, without deception. Jesus teaches us that integrity is not only about doing good, but also about living honestly and without deception. He encourages us to be truthful in all aspects of our lives, whether in our words or actions. In the Gospel, Jesus says, "Let your yes be yes, and your no be no." Matthew 5 verse 37, meaning we should speak with clarity and honesty, and avoid deceit or manipulation. When we are honest, we build trust with others and create relationships that are grounded in truth. One powerful example of this teaching is the story of the woman caught in adultery. The religious leaders brought her before Jesus, hoping to trap him into condemning her. Instead, Jesus responded with integrity, saying, "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." John 8 verse 7. By speaking honestly and without judgment, Jesus revealed the truth of human imperfection and demonstrated how we should approach others with understanding and compassion. Rather than deceit or hypocrisy, integrity also means being honest with ourselves. Jesus taught that we should not be blinded by pride or self-deception, but rather recognize our own flaws and shortcomings. In the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector, Jesus contrasts the prideful self-righteousness of the Pharisee with the humble repentance of the tax collector. The tax collector, who acknowledges his sin and asks for mercy, is the one who is justified before God. Luke 18 verses 9 to 14. This story reminds us that true integrity involves recognizing our mistakes, being honest about our weaknesses, and striving to improve ourselves without hiding behind false appearances. In everyday life, living with integrity means avoiding lies, half-truths, or manipulative behavior. It means being authentic, whether in personal relationships, work, or even in our spiritual lives. As Jesus demonstrated, integrity is not just about what we do in public, but about how we live when no one is watching. Through his example, we learn that honesty is not always easy, but it is always worth it. It is the foundation of a life that pleases God and creates genuine, lasting connections with others. Fourth, integrity means helping others, especially the vulnerable. One of the key teachings of Jesus is that integrity involves not only living a good life yourself, but also helping those in need, particularly the vulnerable and marginalized in society. Jesus repeatedly emphasized that caring for the poor, the sick, the oppressed, and the outcasts is a central part of living a righteous life. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus said, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in." Matthew 25 verse 35. These words remind us that true integrity is seen in how we treat those who cannot repay us, and how we act when no one is watching. A powerful example of this teaching is the parable of the Good Samaritan. In this story, Jesus tells of a man who was beaten and left half dead by the side of the road. Several people, including a priest and a Levite, pass by without offering help. However, a Samaritan, someone from a group despised by Jews at the time, stops and helps the man, caring for his wounds and ensuring he gets to an inn for further care. Despite the social divide between them, the Samaritan's actions were driven by compassion and integrity, demonstrating that love and kindness know no boundaries. Jesus ends the story by asking, "Which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" Luke 10 verse 36. This teaches us that integrity means helping others without prejudice, no matter their background, and showing kindness to those who may not have anyone else to turn to. Jesus also showed his care for the vulnerable through his own actions. He healed the sick, welcomed the children, and spent time with sinners, demonstrating that no one is beyond God's love and care. In the story of the woman at the well, Jesus spoke to a Samaritan woman who was an outcast because of her past, offering her the living water of salvation. John 4 verses 13 to 14. This act of reaching out to someone whom society had marginalized is a clear example of how we should live with integrity. By reaching out to help others, especially those who are suffering or oppressed, regardless of their social status. Living with integrity means showing compassion and making a difference in the lives of others. It means seeing beyond our own interests and helping those who are most in need, whether it's donating time, resources, or offering a kind word. These actions reflect the true spirit of integrity that Jesus taught. By helping others, we not only fulfill our moral duties, but also become living examples of God's love and grace in the world. Fifth, integrity means living fairly and avoiding greed. Integrity also involves living with fairness and avoiding the trap of greed. Jesus often spoke about the dangers of wealth and the importance of prioritizing righteousness over material gain. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus warns, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Luke 12 verse 15. This teaching reminds us that true integrity is not measured by how much we have, but by how we use what we have to serve others and live justly. Greed, or the excessive desire for material wealth, can easily lead people to act unfairly, exploiting others for personal gain, which goes against the principles of honesty and kindness that Jesus emphasized. A striking example of this is the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Zacchaeus was wealthy but dishonest, often taking more money than he was owed. However, when he encountered Jesus, he was moved to change. In a moment of repentance, Zacchaeus promised, "If I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Luke 19 verse 8. His decision to right the wrongs he had done and live fairly is a powerful example of how integrity involves more than just personal honesty. It also means acting fairly and justly toward others, especially when it comes to money and possessions. Jesus also emphasized fairness in his teachings about how we treat others, especially in situations of power and authority. In the parable of the workers in the vineyard, Jesus tells the story of workers who were hired at different times of the day, yet all received the same wage. When the workers who had been hired first complained, the vineyard owner responded, "Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me?" Matthew 20 verse 15. This story teaches us about fairness in a broader sense. It reminds us that fairness doesn't always mean equal treatment in every situation, but rather that we must act justly, with generosity and compassion, according to what is needed. Living with integrity means living justly, not allowing the pursuit of wealth or power to corrupt our values. It means being fair in all our dealings, whether in business, family, or society. Jesus' life and teachings remind us that greed leads to injustice, but integrity leads to fairness, compassion, and a deeper connection with God's will. When we avoid the temptation of greed and choose fairness, we build a life that is aligned with the values of justice and love that Jesus called us to live by. Sixth, integrity means living humbly and avoiding arrogance. Integrity also means living humbly and avoiding arrogance or self-righteousness. Jesus often warned against the dangers of pride and the tendency to look down on others. He taught that true greatness in God's kingdom comes not from outward success or social status, but from a humble heart that serves others. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says, "Whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant." Matthew 20 verse 26. This teaches us that integrity is not about seeking attention, praise, or power over others, but about humbly serving and uplifting those around us. A powerful example of this humility is seen in Jesus washing his disciples' feet. In a culture where foot washing was reserved for the lowest servant, Jesus chose to perform this humble act of service for his followers. Afterward, he explained, "I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." John 13 verse 15. By choosing to serve others in this way, Jesus showed that true integrity involves humility, putting others first and doing so without seeking personal gain or recognition. This act was a radical challenge to the pride and arrogance that often dominate human relationships. In contrast, Jesus also spoke about the dangers of arrogance through the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. The Pharisee, a religious leader, stood in the temple and prayed, "God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector." Luke 18 verse 11. In contrast, the tax collector, a man seen as a sinner by society, humbly prayed, "God, have mercy on me, a sinner." Luke 18 verse 13. Jesus concluded the parable by saying, "For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." Luke 18 verse 14. This parable emphasizes that integrity involves recognizing our own imperfections, being humble in our judgments of others, and not elevating ourselves above others in pride or arrogance. Living with integrity means rejecting the temptation to boast, judge, or seek power over others. It means embracing a humble spirit, being willing to serve others, and acknowledging that no one is superior to another. Jesus, through his words and actions, taught that true integrity comes not from self-exaltation but from a heart that humbly seeks to do God's will and serve others in love. When we live with humility, we reflect the character of Christ, and our integrity shines through in all that we do. Seventh, integrity means being honest with ourselves and others. Integrity also requires being honest with ourselves and others, recognizing our flaws and acting with transparency in all situations. Jesus emphasized the importance of truth, both in our words and in our inner thoughts. In the Gospel of John, Jesus says, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." John 8 verse 32. This highlights that true freedom and peace come from embracing the truth about ourselves and the world around us, without hiding behind lies or denial. When we are honest, we are able to grow, learn from our mistakes, and build stronger, more authentic relationships. One example of Jesus teaching honesty is when he confronted the religious leaders about their hypocrisy. In Matthew 23, he rebukes the Pharisees for their outward show of piety while failing to address the deeper issues of their hearts. He tells them, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean." Matthew 23 verse 27. This criticism reveals how dishonesty, especially when it comes to pretending to be something we are not, ultimately leads to spiritual emptiness. Jesus teaches that integrity is not about appearing righteous, but about being truthful in both our actions and our hearts. Another example comes from the story of the woman at the well, John 4. When Jesus speaks to the Samaritan woman, he gently reveals her past, acknowledging her 5 previous husbands and her current relationship. Yet, he does not condemn her. Instead, he offers her living water, symbolizing grace and the chance for a fresh start. This interaction teaches us that honesty with ourselves, no matter how difficult, is the first step toward healing and transformation. Jesus does not shy away from the truth, but rather invites us to face it with courage and receive his forgiveness. Being honest with ourselves also involves recognizing our weaknesses and acknowledging when we need help. Jesus' parable of the tax collector and the Pharisee, Luke 18 verses 9 to 14, teaches that those who are honest about their shortcomings, like the tax collector who humbly asks for mercy, are the ones who are justified in God's eyes. By contrast, those who refuse to admit their faults and pretend to be perfect, like the Pharisee, miss the opportunity for growth and redemption. Living with integrity means not only being truthful with others, but also being honest with ourselves about who we are, where we fall short, and how we can improve. When we embrace honesty, we allow ourselves to experience true freedom, spiritual growth, and genuine connection with others. Jesus' example shows us that honesty, even when difficult, is essential for living a life of integrity, and it ultimately leads to healing, transformation, and deeper relationships with God and others. Eighth, integrity means persevering in faith and hope. Integrity also involves persevering in faith and hope, especially during difficult times. Jesus teaches us that true integrity is not just about living rightly when things are easy, but about remaining steadfast in our beliefs, even when we face challenges or suffering. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus encourages his followers, saying, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." John 16 verse 33. This statement reminds us that challenges and hardships are a natural part of life, but maintaining our faith in God's goodness and his ultimate plan for us is what truly reflects integrity. Even when life feels uncertain or painful, integrity means holding on to hope and trusting that God is with us. A powerful example of perseverance in faith is seen in the story of Job. Job was a righteous man who faced unimaginable suffering. He lost his wealth, his health, and even his family. Despite everything, Job refused to turn away from God. When his friends urged him to curse God and give up, Job responded, Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. Job 13 verse 15. This unwavering faith, even in the face of immense hardship, demonstrates the kind of integrity that Jesus encourages. Job didn't allow his circumstances to define his relationship with God. Instead, he held firm to his faith and hope, trusting that God's purposes would be fulfilled, even if he couldn't understand them at the time. Jesus also demonstrated this perseverance in his own life, especially as he approached his crucifixion. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prayed with great distress, asking, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." Luke 22 verse 42. Jesus faced the ultimate test of suffering, but his integrity was shown in his complete submission to God's will, even when it meant enduring pain and death. His example teaches us that faith and hope are not about avoiding suffering, but about trusting in God's plan, even when the path is difficult. Integrity in faith also means continuing to hope in God's promises, even when we don't see immediate results. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Romans, "We rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope." Romans 5 verses 3 to 4. This passage shows us that perseverance in faith builds our character and strengthens our hope in the future. Integrity means not losing heart when things are tough, but rather trusting that God is working in our lives, even when we can't yet see the outcome. In life, maintaining integrity through perseverance requires patience and trust in God's timing. Whether facing personal challenges, spiritual doubts, or moments of suffering, we are called to stand firm in our faith and hope. Jesus teaches us that integrity is not about being free from difficulty, but about maintaining our trust in God, no matter what obstacles we face. By persevering in faith, we reflect the strength of character and the hope that comes from knowing God is always with us. Ninth, integrity means being accountable for our actions. Integrity means taking responsibility for our actions and being accountable, both to God and to others. Jesus teaches us that we are not only responsible for our personal conduct, but also for how we affect the lives of those around us. In the Gospel of Matthew, he warns, "Everyone will have to give account on the day of judgment for every empty word they have spoken." Matthew 12 verse 36. This reminds us that every action and every word matters, and we must be accountable for what we say and do, because ultimately, we will be held responsible before God. A strong example of accountability is seen in the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector. Zacchaeus was known for his dishonesty, taking more than he was owed. However, when he encountered Jesus, he took full responsibility for his past actions and declared, "If I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Luke 19 verse 8. Zacchaeus didn't try to justify his behavior or hide his wrongdoings. He openly acknowledged his mistakes and committed to making things right. This act of taking accountability shows that true integrity involves not just admitting when we are wrong, but also actively seeking to repair the damage we've caused. Jesus also taught accountability in his parable of the talents, Matthew 25 verses 14 to 30. In this parable, a master gives his servants different amounts of money, expecting them to use it wisely. When the master returns, he holds each servant accountable for what they did with the resources entrusted to them. The servants who used their talents wisely were rewarded, while the one who buried his talent in fear was reprimanded. This parable teaches us that integrity means using our gifts and resources responsibly, and being prepared to give an account of how we've used them. Taking responsibility for our actions requires humility and courage. It means not shifting the blame onto others or avoiding the consequences of our choices. It also involves acknowledging our impact on others and making amends when necessary. In our relationships, whether with family, friends, or colleagues, integrity calls us to be accountable for how we treat others and to own up to any harm we may have caused. Jesus' teachings remind us that accountability is an essential part of living with integrity, for it fosters trust, respect, and growth. both in our own lives and in the lives of those we influence. 10th, integrity means reflecting God's love in all we do. Integrity, at its core, is about reflecting God's love in every aspect of our lives. Jesus calls us to live in a way that reveals the purity of God's heart, showing love, compassion, and grace to everyone, regardless of their status or how they treat us. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus teaches us to love our neighbors as ourselves. Matthew 22, verse 39, a command that encapsulates the essence of living with integrity. This means that our actions should mirror the love and kindness that God has shown us. And by doing so, we become vessels of His divine light in the world. One of the most powerful examples of this is Jesus' command to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Matthew 5, verse 44. This teaching challenges us to rise above our natural instincts of retaliation or indifference and instead respond with love. When we act in this way, we not only reflect the nature of God, but we also bring healing and peace to a broken world. The love we show to others, especially those who may oppose us, is a testimony of God's boundless love for all humanity. Consider the life of Saint Francis of Assisi, who embodied this teaching in his own life. He chose to live in poverty and care for the poor, the sick, and even animals, seeing in them the face of Christ. His life was a testament to God's love made visible in simple acts of kindness. His integrity lay in the way he aligned his entire being with God's will, reflecting God's love through selfless service to others. Saint Francis didn't just preach love, he lived it in tangible ways. And in doing so, he became a beacon of God's light in a dark world. Ultimately, living with integrity is not about achieving perfection, but about allowing God's grace to work through us. As we strive to embody God's love, we reflect His greatness in the world. Integrity means allowing His presence to transform us so that, in everything we do, we draw others closer to the divine. The beauty of integrity lies in its simplicity. It is the quiet yet powerful reflection of God's perfect love in a world that desperately needs it. By living with integrity, we become co-creators with God, building a world filled with hope, peace, and love that points back to Him, the source of all goodness. And in this divine dance of grace, we realize that even our most imperfect efforts can be woven into His perfect plan, where the light of God's love shines brightly, transforming not only ourselves but the world around us.